Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. There's an urgent question that every business owner needs to ask right now. Will my internet-connected devices work after the 29th of October? Because that's when Australia's 3G network is due to be shut down. Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman Bruce Bilson is warning that the shutdown could cause huge disruptions if older point-of-sale systems, vending machines and even farm equipment are still connected to the 3G network and simply stop working. He says the time to prepare is now, as he explains the extent of the issue to Jeff Waters.
I'm sure many of your audience would have heard some of the conversation about needing to change your handsets, your mobile phones that are on 3G as the network's being shut down. That spectrum can be used for a higher and better use, and that's what the telcos are doing. So there's still some tens of thousands of people who use 3G as for their phones, their mobile phones. And of course, they may well get quite a shock on the 29th of October when the network shut down. And there are some good measures that the telcos are putting in place to help people convert over to 4G and 5G handsets and support for people that are in financial hardship for doing that. Even those on 4G, Jeff, some of those default to 3G for emergency calls. So that's something to be alert to as well. And there's a mechanism through a website called 3gclosure.com.au where people can punch in an SMS and get a bit of a response on their mobile phone handset. But that's only part of the story. What I'm particularly concerned about is even with a higher degree of public attention on 3G handsets not working after the end of October, what's less focused on is the fact there's an awful lot of kit, equipment and technology used by small family and farming businesses that actually uses 3G as its communication link. We can think of everything from some older FPOS machines, even those black pads that you see at car parks that you might wave your card in front of to pay for something. Vending machines, often the chip that sits behind the payment pad there is a 3G chip. There's also equipment monitoring, security equipment. Some health devices use 3G spectrum as their way of communicating back to base. And then, some things like total stations that surveyors use. I mean, you and I might rather the word theodolites, but they're called total stations these days. Often they're a 3G chip as well as asset tracking technology, and on some farming properties doing remote movement of cattle through opening and shutting gates, checking water levels, and even microclimate data can all be done using 3G technology. So that's my concern, Jeff, is that there's far less awareness around that. There's been some effort by the telcos to check who's paying 3G bills and trying to join those up with, let's call them third-party technology and service providers, but still too many aren't aware that come the end of October, perhaps a vital piece of kit for their business might simply not function.
You use the term shock, which is very worrying. How big a shock does this have the potential to be?
Well, it depends on what that tech is that you're using. If it's a remote security system and you've got assets under supervision with wireless cameras and the like, well, you won't be able to see anything. If you're using it to control an open gate and move stock on a farming property, who knows what might happen. I'd hate to think you and I are pulling out of a car park and we're trying to get out of that car park and all of a sudden our payment process doesn't work because that payment pad, that FPOS machine, that vending piece of technology doesn't actually function. So that's where my concern is. It could be anything from quite a degree of inconvenience. Business owners might be flustered that something they've counted on and not really thought twice about because the functionality is what they're focused on, not the invisible communications link. They might well find something that they just take for granted is not something they're able to do, then that could have important implications for their enterprise.
You say the telcos are looking into it and trying to trace through bills and things like that. Does that mean they don't know the exact extent of how big a problem this might become?
Well, I guess the answer is yes. They don't know exactly how big an issue it is because the technology, the third-party vendors of that equipment and those systems isn't something the telecommunications company have a direct line of sight over. What I've said, though, and what I've urged as part of the parliamentary inquiry around the 3G closure is that they do have line of sight over their billing arrangements. So if Jeff Waters and Bruce Bilson were paying, juicy 3G communication bills, there's a fair chance you and I are doing something with that spectrum. And so what I've been urging the telcos to do is to have a look through their billing technology, see who's still paying for the use of that spectrum, and through that try and trace back who those third-party users are. I know they've done some effort in that regard. Some have acted quite responsively. I know some of the payment pad providers that, where you tap and go, and some of the banks have done a bit of work around trying to trace back with their customers to say, hey, are you aware that payment piece of kit you use is not going to function after the 29th of October. There's been some movement there. But even in talking to the providers of that technology, they're still anticipating a mad rush on the 29th of October when people go to do something, and they simply can't.
It sounds like a problem which would have major implications in rural, regional and remote Australia, where they might find it difficult to get enough of that tech, given the distances and costs involved. Is that an issue?
Yeah, it is an issue. I mean, some of the people that own, say, vending machines, you and I might be running a mining site, and in our cafeteria, rather than having, people there, we might have a vending machine for lunches and food and snacks and the like. It's not a quick, it's not working, someone will be here in hours scenario for many of those people. So that's a particular concern. And frankly, you and I probably wouldn't want our Herefords wandering down the local road because the tech's not functioning on managing gates or even the topping up water supplies. The government's delayed the shutdown of 3G, realising, I think appropriately, that there still is some awareness raising to be done and action to be taken. I know there is a particular focus on safety, so there's a lot of health monitoring technology that operates on 3G. That's been a particular focus. And also, some of the emergency buttons you push if lifts aren't working, they're also on 3G. So there's been a real safety focus, and that's fair enough. I'm just urging small family and farming businesses to really be proactive, to not become a casualty of the 3G disconnection. And if in doubt, inquire, take steps, give yourself the opportunity not to be caught short when the network is shut down.
So how do I do that, Bruce, if I'm listening to this and I don't know what sort of chip is in the back end of my technology? How on earth do I find out? What help can I get?
Yeah, the trick is probably to contact your supplier. I know that's probably a little tedious, but, if you're using kit that's relying on a wireless communications link, whether it's back to base, whether it's, for payment processing, whether it's the way of reaching out to other machinery that's activated remotely, the best trick to do is to go back to the people that sold that to you and just say, hey, I'm a bit concerned. I don't want to be finding myself without functionality after the 29th of October. Please, can you give me some advice? Now, I know, again, we mentioned the surveyors and the total station suppliers. They've been reaching out to people they know that use technology that will be rendered inoperable when 3G is shut down. So they've been doing that. And I mentioned earlier some of those payment pad providers and suppliers, vending machine people, they've been doing the same. But there's a whole lot more of it around, and I'm just doing all I can to raise awareness of this as a potential challenge and urging people to take steps now to inquire, to satisfy themselves they won't be caught short. And if they do find they're using 3G, give themselves adequate time to have that chip replaced with one that'll function well after the 29th of October.
Sounds like all very good advice, but there will be some skeptics out there, Bruce, who are old enough, perhaps like us, to remember the millennium bug and the great lead up to that. And they might say, oh, no, it'll all be fine. I'll be fine. What would you say to them?
Yep, roll the dice. That wouldn't be what I would do, and if they're courageous, go for it. The difference between the millennium bug and this is people are anticipating what might happen, what certain sequences of code might do when we ticked over the year 2000 and imagining those possibilities. Jeff, you need no imagination here whatsoever. 3G will simply not work after the 29th of October. And if you reckon you're okay, well, that's great. I love confident people, even if there's no basis to be confident. Rest assured, if you're relying on 3G, it won't be there. So my urging is, if you're uncertain, make the call. Or if you are disinclined to take any proactive action, have some contingencies in place, because if you do find a vital piece of kit for your business is now no longer functioning, it will probably be not hours before someone can do something about that. And, that's okay. You just get to reflect and maybe listen to more of your podcasts. They're the options, I suppose.
That was Bruce Bilson, the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.